Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Nittany Lion Sports Report live on Bob Long Sports. Bob Long, Tyler Gehlhaus, and indeed, it is some mashed potatoes after the first week of college football. The Nittany Lions in absolutely dominating fashion, not to be unexpected, but a lot of good things to take away from a 79-7 win over Idaho. And Tyler, the first thing I want to talk about is the play of Sean Clifford, a guy that we didn't know what we were going to see necessarily coming into the year. Certainly with the transfer of Tommy Stevens, one of the biggest question marks, if not the biggest question mark of the team. I think he did overall a pretty good job. There were a few passes, I think, dropping the ball in the bucket on long throws. He threw from his back foot at times when he was throwing the ball down the field. Room for improvement, but generally speaking, looks to have some chemistry, looks to have some trust, and I think overall did a pretty good job for the team this weekend.
Yeah, I would agree with you on overall and as well as Sean Clifford. I think that Penn State, they did what they had to do. A lot of people look at it 79-7. Oh, they ran it up. They didn't have to score 79. Well, to be honest with you, they were scoring their last points in the fourth quarter with walk-ons across the board, and I think it's a good thing to get your walk-ons involved in a game like that. Guys that give it their all, aren't on scholarship. I think that's a good thing. And also the way last season went and started against Appalachian State, they really set the tone, and they surprised a lot of people, not by beating Idaho 79-7, but by the way they beat Idaho and how they looked and how the young guys looked, how the skilled position looked, and really how that defensive line looked, who's going to be a terror all season for any foe that they have to play. But, yeah, in terms of Clifford, he started the game a little slow. He airmailed some passes, but he settled in nicely. I mean, he finished the day 14 of 23 for 280, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, found different targets. He's throwing the running backs, tight ends, receivers. Everybody got involved. So really good display, great first game, and it's something they got to build on and keep going from there.
Big show coming up here tonight, guys. We're going to have Chris Pierangeli, the head soccer coach and track and field coach for CB East, on for our weekly guest picker segment. He's a Penn State graduate, knows the team quite well, and is a former co-host here at Bob Long Sports. So we have royalty coming into the studio, and we're excited to have Chris. And a lot more to get to. We're going to talk about our Blitz segment. It's going to specifically focus on the offensive line, more questions than answers, and why that's actually a good thing, and where there is going to be some flexibility, versatility, and the ability to put an athletic 5 guys on the line at one time. Excited to get to that segment here this evening. But, Tyler, want to talk also about the stable of running backs that Penn State has. And we saw 2 freshmen get the balance of the carries, Devin Ford and Noah Kane. And Devin Ford had the big 81-yard run. Justin Shorter running down the field. Everybody wants to talk about that, and for good reason. Put that extra effort into the play and then knew not to block in the back. But really, let's talk about these backs. Ricky Slade didn't really have a full complement of carries because the game got out of hand. But what you see is, and the word is stable. I mean, a stable of running backs that we'll see certainly more difficult competition as the year goes on. But a lot of good things with each of those guys, and I want to break that down.
Yeah, I mean, the last couple of years Penn State has had Saquon Barkley, Miles Sanders. But really when they were both here, when Saquon Barkley was running back, it was pretty much all Saquon Barkley. Last year with Miles Sanders, it was pretty much all Miles Sanders with a little bit of Ricky Slade here and there, not much. This year, you're going to see all 4 guys run. They all bring a different style. As you mentioned earlier, Slade, the starter, 5 carries, 9 yards. Now, also had a couple of receptions as well to go with one reception for a big gain of 26. But each of these running backs brings something different. You saw Ford with the 81-yard touchdown run. Kane is more of a powerful, inside the tackles, run you over type of back. Kane and Ford both true freshmen. And the other 2, Brown and Slade, are only sophomores, Brown being a redshirt sophomore. I mean, so you have 4 guys that you can give the ball to, and it's almost like they're going to go with the hot hand a lot of times, and whoever's the most fresh, and that is an unbelievable thing to be able to throw 4 backs out there and be able to score and make plays with any of them.
And with some versatility, Journey Brown being able to catch the football. Ricky Slade, they're trying to work that more into his game this year. Room for improvement, I think, on both of those guys' sides. But, man, can you line up multiple guys
Right.
on the field at one time?
Yeah, and the thing is the last couple of years with Barkley and Sanders, you've seen 1,000-yard runners and more. I don't know if you're going to see that this year from Penn State because of the amount of backs that they have and the carries being split. But outside of a statistic thing, this is a good thing for Penn State running backs as well as recruiting. You already see recruiting. They have 2 coming in next year from the state of Florida. Keziah Holmes, Kevon Lee, both top 4-star, highly ranked players coming in from Florida. Not to mention, all 4 of these backs should be back. I mean, none of them
Bingo.
can go to the pros, except Brown would be eligible, but he wouldn't be ready, in my opinion. But, you never know what's going to happen transfer-wise, that kind of thing. I don't want to speculate, obviously, because I don't see it going down that route. But that's going to put you with 6 elite backs. And
it's a great point.
And the good thing that you're seeing is it's a great problem to have, one, because injuries happen, hot hand, and it's competition. Everyone's going to get better from it. But also, these guys are seeing, hey, look, it's not just one guy getting the ball. They're going to get me the ball, and that's what running backs want. And then at the same time, if you're good enough to go to the NFL, well, look at Miles Sanders. He went in the second round really after 1 year of really playing and starting at Penn State.
Yep.
And he doesn't have that many, he doesn't have that many hits because he didn't get the ball too much in college, so he's fresh going to the NFL. And I think that's something that's going to Penn State's advantage right now.
Yeah, I mean, and with that one in particular, right, Miles Sanders came into Penn State as the #1 running back recruit in the country, so he had that pedigree coming in. And I think NFL teams certainly liked the measurables that they had in Miles Sanders and his performance. So I think when you look at Penn State becoming, man, I don't know that I love the U comparison, linebacker U, which obviously is a staple of Penn State, quarterback U, running back U. Is Penn State running back U? I don't know. But what they are doing is putting out a really good crop of running backs year after year, now 2 straight that have had success in the NFL, and now on their roster currently 4 guys that look to have green lights and be part of the offense all season long. Now, another guy I want to talk about, Tyler, is Justin Shorter, a guy that we talked about as recently as last week saying, hey, just not a ton of buzz about him in the offseason, but he seems ready to go and up top the depth chart. I thought he had a very nice game, and what we saw was an offense that was somewhat vanilla. I thought some of the routes that were run, some of the packages that were designed, and for very good reason, were kept pretty simplistic in nature. No reason to give away everything at this point in the year. But Tyler, Justin Shorter did a good job in some pretty simple routes, getting open, making the catch, maybe making a guy miss, or at least getting forward for a few more yards. Of course, running down the field along with Devin Ford throughout that long 81-yard touchdown run. I thought between he and KJ Hamler, Daniel George had a couple decent catches. You also have a lot of depth at that wide receiver position. I don't know that I'm prepared to say this was Shorter's time to kind of break out and shed everything from last year, but I do think he's on a good trajectory. KJ Hamler as advertised, and that wide receiver room as a whole pretty deep and as advertised.
Yeah, it's a very good receiving room. A lot of guys came back, younger guys from last year. They're another year in the system. We just talked about the running back splitting carries. I mean, you look down the list here, KJ Hamler led the team with 4 catches, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns. Shorter 3 for 36, and everybody else outside of Weston Carr and Devin Ford, a running back, had less than 3 catches. So the ball's being spread around. It's going to be interesting because it was only 1 game, and you're not going to show a lot, like you mentioned. But the offense puts up 79 points, and Jahan Dotson has 1 catch for 13 yards. So Freiermuth had 1 for 25. So I mean, there's just it's going to be so interesting to see how the ball is spread around with this team. I mean, Clifford. Looks like the line is getting better again, Idaho, but we'll talk about that a little later on the Blitz. But there's no shortage of talent on this roster, and the receiving room who I went into last year thinking it was a strength of the team last year. I was quickly fooled. I thought that Tompkins and Johnson were going to be ready to go, and as upperclassmen, and I was fooled. A lot of people were. And it's time for these younger guys like Shorter to step up, and I believe he does have all the tools. He's 6'5", 235 pounds, and he runs like a 4.445. So all the tools are there. It's just a matter of this group putting it together, and so far so good.
Well, the other thing that needs to be said about the wide receivers this year versus last year, we are one game in. All those things you were talking about, the measurables and the speed and the size and the strength, not much of that has changed, Tyler, but they're catching the ball. And it's through one game, but I need to see consistent catching of the football. I mean, it sounds very simple. We can't continue to see the big drops that we saw last year. How much of that was David Corley and not being able to get the best out of the wide receivers? Jared Parker, by all accounts, is developing a good connection with those wide receivers. Connections does not catch the football for these guys, but it seems like he has the experience. He's putting them through drills that Corley was not last year. There's more of an emphasis on catching the football, as simple as that may sound. And I want to see what happens over the next 11 games of the regular season. Is Parker the guy that can put this class over the top from a wide receiver perspective? And maybe even more so than that, what does another year of experience do? Right? As well as Juwan Johnson no longer being with the program, Brandon Polk no longer being with the program. Those guys were part of that problem. I'm very encouraged by what I saw, but I don't want to declare the issues over. Sure. I want to see it in the early parts of Big Ten play.
Yeah, and you know, it was only one game, as we stated, and we all knew that Idaho is not the strongest opponent Penn State's going to play this year. But it was an amazing, I would call it, I don't want to say transformation, but for lack of a better term, I'll use that. From what we saw last year, even with the little things like you mentioned with Shorter running down and blocking, getting in the way of a defender close to Ford on a long touchdown run. I mean, they just seem to have more confidence, you know, no drops that we saw, and just physical, talented receivers, and I think that coaching does have a lot to do with that, and I think that they're going to be much improved this year from last year. I mean, and really the only way to go is up from last year's receiving corps.
Well, it's a brilliant segue, because when we talk about coordinators being replaced in a unit that struggled last year, we can talk about special teams as well. And it's not just a coordinator issue, but Jordan Stout came in and was absolutely dynamite. 13 for 13 on touchbacks. One of them actually didn't reach the end zone. It was fair caught at about the 3-yard line. But a good balance of those 13 went even beyond the back line of the end zone, almost into the student section. He is clearly a shining star of the transfer market and what made its way to Penn State this year. Jordan Stout was and is an absolute stud, not to mention kicking a 53-yard field goal, longest since 2015 for this program.
With room.
With room to spare. And so I tell you what, between that, Jake Pinniger looks very comfortable, of course, on the extra points, but while leg strength isn't necessarily an issue for him in being able to kick the ball a certain distance, he has had trouble with field goals past 40 yards. Perhaps there is some sort of platoon here, or perhaps we're looking at the job being very much in the balance. It's not something Franklin's going to talk about during press conferences. We're going to have to watch this on Saturdays.
Good problem to have. Whoever's going to get us 3 points, that's it, right? Because those 3 points are going to become very valuable once Big Ten play rolls around. And I got to ask you something, because obviously now with touchbacks, it comes out to the 25-yard line. If they fair catch it, they get it at the 25-yard line as well on a kickoff. I do like the fact that everything is a touchback, I think. And I say that because if you watch how fast, and it's harder to see on TV, but at the game, how fast Penn State's special teams get down there. I mean, no lie, when that ball's landing in the end zone, they're pretty much at the 10-yard line, 15, 10-yard line going into the end zone. So, yes, the touchbacks are great with the opponent getting the ball at the 25, but once in a while it would be very nice to have them back even farther the opponent. But at the same time, you're eliminating the chance of a big return, which I think is, does a lot more damage than, how am I trying to say this, than having a return go to the 15-yard line. It's more damaging than rewarding. It's more damaging than rewarding, I would say.
Yeah. What is from an to get into the analytics? What is the expected point differential from every drive starting at the 25-yard line versus half at the 15, another 3 quarters at the 25, and then two going to the house and another.
And I mean, when you're giving the other team the ball at the 25, I mean, not that that's good field position, but when you're rolling out that defense, they're not going to be easy to move the ball on all year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's, in my opinion, the advantage with Stout kicking off.
I think my official position on that, and I get it, and I could see it's something. I think you pound it through the end zone every time and tell your defense, okay, get comfortable starting at the 25-yard line. That's what we're going to do after scores.
Well, yeah, because at that point, even if you kick it, they're catching at the 5. They can fair catch it anyway and just take it to the 25.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it is a good problem to have. It may be something they explore, and it's not something I'm opposed to. I wouldn't think there's a strong feeling on either side or reason for argument. But my thought is just pound it through the end zone, start at the 25,
just keep doing it.
Make them drive the ball 50 yards for a realistic field goal attempt or 45 yards, whatever that may be, and make them drive at 75 for a touchdown. But it is an interesting point because Penn State has much more athletic special teams guys running down the field than they have in years past.
But if you remember last year, a lot of kicks were going out of bounds and stuff, and I think that brings the ball out to the 35. And, I mean, that's a huge difference at 10 yards there. So, I mean, it's definitely – we talked about the offense receivers improvement. I mean, special teams improvement from what we saw from game 1 was like night and day as well.
Absolutely right. And so the only thing to mention on the offensive side besides all of that, and we'll talk about the offensive line on the blitz, but Pat Freiermuth getting a little banged up. I believe he's going to be okay, but we really, of course, James Franklin's never going to really let on. But Freiermuth came out in the second quarter, did not return, left on his own power. Looked like he got a pretty good shot as he went up to catch a ball that was going over his head.
Shot to the head, was it? Was it to the head or the shoulder?
I thought it was the shoulder, but I don't.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play this week because it's Buffalo.
Pretty big line.
Yeah, we'll get into that for sure. But it's the kind of thing. It's like you'd rather save them for Big Ten play. I mean, even Pitt, but Big Ten play, and I think that's kind of what you saw with Ricky Slade too. Just kind of keep them fresh. I mean, if there's no reason to really run them and get them banged up, give other guys the opportunity, and I think it's a good time to rest people if you can, if they're a little banged up.
Yeah, I think you're right. Again, Nittany Lion Sports Report here. We are live from Blue Bell. Bob Long, Tyler Gehlhaus, excited to be alongside. We'll have the blitz coming up shortly, talking about the offensive line, the versatility there, and some of the decisions that Penn State's going to have to make between Will Fries, Des Holmes, Rasheed Walker, as well as some of the interior guys. And I think it'll be an interesting discussion up on the whiteboard. Also, Chris Pierangeli, former Bob Long Sports host and the current coach of CB East Soccer here in Philadelphia and their track and field team, joins us in studio to make his picks. Tyler, we had quite an impressive first guest, Tyler Kern of the LaSalle College High School broadcasting team for football on Bob Long Sports as well. He went 5-1 last week in 6 games, 5 pick'ems, and then Penn State against the spread.
Obviously, Penn State covered the, I think it was like 38.5, spread 39.5.
That was
very,
easy money.
very impressive showing. Tyler Kern went 5-1. I believe what was the one game that he got wrong? I believe BC, who I was going to go with to beat Virginia Tech, and I guess I listened to you guys pick, and I thought you guys were smart, which he's very smart. You're pretty smart, too. You both beat me, so I was 3-3. But, yeah, so 5-1, great start, and he might be up for an award, a prize at the end of the year. We'll have to see how everybody else does, but we got some interesting games this week that we'll get to later with Chris.
The gauntlet has been laid for the rest of our guests over the course of the year, so we'll enjoy that, and I think all you will as well. We're going to tell a little bit of Chris's story and all of our guests' story, and then get some fun picks to close down the show. But lots to talk about on the defensive side of the football as well. Not that it particularly matters because it is Buffalo, but good to see Brandon Smith, the right call there at the end, no targeting so that he wouldn't be suspended for the first half of the Buffalo game.
That was a major hit.
That was unbelievable.
That was impressive.
Yes, it was. Let's talk, though, about those linebackers. I mean, we knew coming into this year that it was going to be a special group, and I think it certainly is. Cam Brown sitting out the first half due to the suspension after the targeting against Kentucky Jan Johnson hawking down in the middle, and then Jesse Luketa getting the start at the will with Micah playing strong with Cam Brown's absence. Micah Parsons moving over to the will with the Sam going to be Cam Brown. Strong side linebacker Cam Brown, where on the side of the line where the tight end is, to be able to rush the passer like that.
That is the strong side, right?
Yes.
Because that's something.
I actually had a request for this from one of our listeners.
Because it is a little confusing. I actually am not too familiar. I know what it stands for. Sam. They call it Sam, and that's a strong side,
yep.
right?
That's where, when you're overloaded to one side, whether that's if you have a 2 tight end set, it's where you have your X receiver with likely a slot back or something like that on that side of the field.
Mike is middle. And Will is weak side.
That's right.
So what is the strength like? Micah Parsons is a weak side linebacker, but he played the strong side, the Sam position. So, like, what is the difference? How could it be an advantage? Like, how do you know? I guess what I'm saying is who's suited better to play the Sam versus Will, like the major differences.
Well, think of it this way, right? Sam, strong side linebacker, tight end in front of you. So you need to either be able to drop back in coverage if you're playing man-to-man, and let's say you're in a base 4-3 package, right? And you have a safety that you want to keep over the top, 3 wide receivers and a tight end. Based upon the amount of defensive backs on the field there, you're going to need that linebacker to pick up that tight end in coverage. That's most likely going to be your strong side or Sam linebacker.
So you're going to have, and I'm not saying that obviously Micah Parsons isn't athletic because he's a freak, but Cam Brown, I guess, is maybe more better in pass coverage? I mean, is that where you get the strong? I would say
the combination of that, yep, and the ability to, I think of Sam as a guy that's going to kind of plug that gap and be in there on run coverage, right? A tight end can do one of 2 things. Can go out in passing. Mm-hmm. It can run block. The weak side I think of as your stronger rusher of the passer.
Because there's no tight end for the extra blocker if he stays in the block.
You can run a
kind
little
of
stunt.
freelance a little bit more and do okay. All right.
You can drop back into a zone, of course, in that look as well, and that's a strength of Micah Parsons. And so I do believe
he fits the Will a lot better than he does Sam.
I think he fits both great, and I think he can play the middle linebacker, and I think at some point before he's done here at Penn State, he's going to play the middle linebacker because you're going to have Brandon Smith on one side and Lance Dixon on the other. As long as that happens by next year, because I think it's 3 and done for Micah Parsons. But I think he can play anywhere. I think he's your most talented linebacker in general, and so that's why they put him lined up on the strong side. But I think he has some serious advantages and some serious athletic traits that make him also quite dangerous on the weak side.
Gotcha. Now since we're talking about the linebackers, what's your opinion on Jan Johnson in the middle? I know a lot of people are kind of like, oh, he's a former walk-on and he was a wrestler, but he seems to just always be in the right spot. He's fundamental. He's sound. But a lot of people, including myself, would really like to see Ellis Brooks out there in the middle. He did really good things last year when he got on the field, number 13. A higher-rated recruit. And a lot of people look at that. They're like, why is a former walk-on in the starting linebacker when you have a highly rated recruit? He's only a redshirt sophomore right now, whereas Johnson's a senior. But I just want to get your opinion on the middle linebacker since we talked about the 2 other positions and Jan Johnson and behind him with Ellis Brooks.
Let me start this by saying I'm big fan of Ellis Brooks. And I guess me saying that Micah Parsons will be a middle linebacker on this team at some point may take away from a guy like Ellis Brooks' playing time, because Ellis Brooks is not a Sam and he's not a Will. When I think of a middle linebacker, more often than not, your safety or your middle linebacker are going to be your signal caller, your play caller on the defensive side, the quarterback of the defense. And that's because he needs to be in the middle of everything.
Great tacklers, too.
Great tacklers, right? Because the ball, anything coming through the A or B gap is most likely going to be in the area of that middle linebacker in terms of run protection. He can also blitz right up the middle. He also, from a zone perspective, I think is the most important linebacker, because when you're in a zone package, the weakest part of the middle of the field is the middle of the field, is that seam. Because you're going to have guys your defensive backs chucking wide receivers at the line and then sitting in a zone. And unless you're playing nickel or dime, more likely those defensive backs are going to be a little bit more concentrated on the hash marks and outside, and your safeties are going to be covering over the top. So you need to have a middle linebacker if you're in that 4-3 coverage and have 3 linebackers on the field versus a nickel package where you're only going to have 2. It's that middle linebacker that is going to have to take up the middle of the field. And that's not as much about athleticism as it is about knowledge of the game, because there is so much space there. It's about reading the quarterback's eyes. And, from a quickness perspective, it helps, but it's more important right place, right time, understanding the seam in the middle of that field. So from a Jan Johnson perspective, I'm a big fan. I've been impressed with his tackling. I've been impressed with his ability to be in the middle of the field and kind of make a cohesive defensive unit. And, yeah, he's not as highly regarded as these other guys, but I think there's a reason he's out there, because you're seeing a ton of freshmen get playing time over upperclassmen.
He's not playing because he's a senior.
Yeah. Jan Johnson is earning that time. I think he's done a great job. Governor Mifflin boy from out in
there you
Reading.
go. I mean, I think it's just an interesting thing, because you look at all these highly recruited linebackers across the board on the depth chart right now, and he's literally the only one that probably didn't have any stars coming out of high school. I mean, he was a walk-on that went there to wrestle, and it's a great story. And he's playing great football too. So
because we expected him last year to lose that job.
It's always been kind of expected. Okay, when's Jan Johnson going to – and he just doesn't lose a job, and he's a hard worker. He knows what he's doing in the middle, and he's almost like that security blanket for the defense. And he's like the quarterback. You said it earlier, signal caller. He's experienced. They obviously trust him. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Yep. And let's be real, and I'm not necessarily comparing him to this guy in terms of his Penn State career. The guy that came before him in that Mike spot, Jason Kambidna, was not the most athletic linebacker on the field, but he was the smartest. He understood where the ball was going before it went there, which allowed him to be in the proper position. He wouldn't have been the best strong side linebacker in the world, but Jason Kambidna ran that defense out of the Mike position. And I think Jan Johnson, while not as doesn't quite have the notoriety that Jason Kambidna did, is playing a very similar role on this team amongst a group of more athletic defensemen than Kambidna was playing with.
That is a good comparison.
So, yeah, that's a good discussion. I'm glad we got into that. Again, that was one of our loyal listeners, Kevin McClernand, who brought that up to us.
Great
he said,
question.
Hey, you talk about Sam and Will, and there may be a group of fans that want to go deeper on that.
And most people don't know what it is, so that's good that we talked about
and
that.
Even if you do, it just makes for compelling discussion,
I
think.
learned a lot about it tonight from you, so
good
job, Bob.
Hey, I appreciate that.
That's almost like your Blitz segment.
There it is. Yeah, we can skip right over and get Chris in here earlier. So do you want to talk about the safeties? The only thing of note is the absence of Brisker.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't know how much we really saw from Idaho. I mean, they had, I think, like 5 first downs a whole game or something ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, they couldn't do anything. Brisker didn't. He was pretty absent. I mean, he got in, but I think that's good that we didn't really hear much about defensive backs. I mean, obviously the first play of the game, Garrett Taylor almost got ejected.
Mm-hmm.
Was ruled targeting. They overturned it. Probably the right call. And that was good.
In the stadium, I got to tell you.
I thought it was clean, and I was in the stadium too.
Okay.
I thought it was clean. I didn't. Obviously, the Smith one. I didn't see live, but I saw.
I felt differently, but I totally grant that I may not have had the right angle on that one. I'm not willing to die on that hill. So
okay.
Yeah, I actually didn't see a replay. In the stadium, it looked a little oh boy.
Yeah, kind of like first play, like. That would have been such a bad start for him. Like, first play, you're juiced up, ready to go. And then he would have to sit out the whole game, but would have been ready for the next game. But, nobody wants to miss a game in college.
Yeah.
So, usually when you're secondary, especially safeties, when you're not hearing about them, this is something I heard on 94.1 or 97.5, one of the two, the other day, talking about the Eagles safeties. When you're not hearing about them is usually when they're playing their best ball.
Yep.
Almost like a kicker, like, when you hear about the kicker, here he comes, like, But when your safeties are playing well, you usually don't hear much about them because and that's a good thing, and we didn't hear much about them, and hopefully with Wade and Taylor, Sutherland, and Brisker, those 4 moving forward, hopefully they stay steady back there.
It's a good group. It's a deep group. Last group to talk about, well, I guess two groups. Defensive backs, I don't really have a ton to say.
I don't have much.
Because the front seven was so impressive.
And when the front seven, especially the front four, are doing that, it's going to make these D-backs look even better than what they are, which is awesome. I mean, you saw Reed had the interception, almost took it back to the house. They're just going to put so much pressure on these quarterbacks that the quarterback's constantly going to be thinking, is Gross-Matos coming from behind? Is Tony coming from behind? Is Owe coming? Like, where's Parsons? So they're going to have to worry about all this stuff. Not to mention, you still got to throw against great corners and really solid safeties. So it's like, it's a very good defense that if that pass rush keeps up, people are going to have a really difficult time throwing the ball, and quarterbacks aren't going to be comfortable, and that is a good thing for Penn State.
Yep, P.J. Mustipher tied for the team lead in tackles, I believe, coming out of technically a backup role. None of that really matters.
It
when we look
really
at snap
doesn't
counts,
because they rotate so much. And Shelton played well,
like
too.
that. Yes.
Who started there. And you're right. Starting, I mean, even like linebackers and the defense is going to rotate a lot.
It's funny you say that. I was more coming from the perspective of playing Idaho, but do you think we're going to see that much rotation?
Do. I mean, I really do because, especially on the line, I think you're going to find guys with a niche, like an Owe is probably going to be used more as a third down.
Kind of Shakatoni's freshman role.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you are in the sense of you want to keep guys fresh. I think you'll see the majority of the rotating coming from the D-line.
Yeah.
Obviously, that is like the grind never stops on the lines. And I think you'll see it a little bit here and there at linebacker, probably not as much. And I know you're probably going to see it at the cornerback positions and even safety, because at cornerback, Keaton Ellis, a freshman from State College High School, they're raving about him. He's a long cornerback, and he's already making moves on the depth chart. So I think you're going to – and especially because Reed is a senior and Castro Fields is a junior who a lot of people are saying could potentially leave early for the pros. Mm-hmm. You want to get guys' experience behind them. Trent Gordon, Donovan Johnson, who didn't play due to suspension last week, Keaton Ellis, guys like that, Joey Porter Jr., who saw the field a good amount. You want to get these guys reps, meaningful reps too, and then your backup safeties, Sutherland and Brisker, could arguably be starters on the team. So you're going to see a good amount of rotation. I would say probably linebacker, maybe the least, although they're going to want to get those young guys in there, Smith, Dixon, Lucetta. So it's going to be very interesting. But first and foremost, the D-line is going to be a cycle, because the fresher you keep those guys and you can go deep there, it's going to be a real problem for opposing teams.
A great start to the Nittany Lion Sports Report here tonight, very much like the Nittany Lion season. We're going to come back on the other side. It's our Blitz segment, the whiteboard, where we go up there, and we're going to talk tonight about a really interesting part of the equation for the Nittany Lions, and that's the offensive line. We talked about rotation on the defensive line. Boy, the offensive line, you like continuity, but a lot of decisions being made in that locker room right now and by this coaching staff about who the line's going to be like going forward. I think we're far from a finished product, but it does have a chance to be a good line. And we'll talk a lot about that on the other side and how that's going to match with the offense that Ricky Ronnie's looking to run. We'll be right back.
Ford is Mayfair's neighborhood Ford store.
Nobody knows your neighborhood like Dunphy Ford.
Nearly 40 years.
Right here on Frankfurt Avenue.
Generation after generation. Our neighbors continue to be our customers. We have access to the cars and trucks you want with financing you need.
Dunphy Ford is Northeast Philly's first choice for America's #1 brand. 7700 Frankfurt Avenue in Mayfair. Online at www.dumpyford.com.
Come experience the Dumpy difference. You'll be glad you did.
One of the most important relationships a business can have is with its commercial banker. This is Bob Long, and when I'm not broadcasting sports,
I'm servicing my clients and building relationships with prospective clients. Whether now is the time to grow through capital investment, to drive operational efficiencies, or to leave a legacy through succession planning, I can be a resource to guide you through the process. Bob Long, a commercial banker in the greater Philadelphia area, where my goal is to help your business grow.
What does your character look like? Does it bounce back after each setback? Does it stand out by standing up? Does it make good on good intentions? Character is invisible until it's not. Only through action will the world know what it's made of, what you're made of. Find out how you can strengthen the character of your community alongside empowered veterans and families of the fallen at travismanion.org.
I chose CCM because I have found that this company, on the level of scaling that we have here, the volume that we are doing, to truly have every department head and employee fully engaged in the mission of the company to make it an originator-focused, production-first company. I have not found that anywhere I've worked, and I've worked at one of the largest banks in the world, down to the smallest tiny community bank and correspondent lender. No one has been able to consistently deliver that message.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Nittany Lion Sports Report, and now it's time for the Blitz, which we do every week, breaking down one concept of either the offense or defense and what's important. Today, we're going to talk about the offensive line, and we're going to use each of these markers: center here in the middle, left guard and left tackle, right guard, right tackle, and then the quarterback. So I want to start talking about the tackles because I thought we had clarity going into the season. I thought that Rasheed Walker was going to be playing over here at the left tackle position, and I thought that Will Fries was going to be playing over here at the right tackle position. I knew that Des Holmes was playing very well in camp and that coaches had a lot of good things to say about him, but I thought that we were going to have Will Fries on the right side and Rasheed Walker on the left, specifically because Walker was out playing Holmes and Walker had an affinity for the left side versus the right side. So essentially, Will Fries was getting the right side over Des Holmes in part because Rasheed Walker was much more comfortable on the left. But what we ended up seeing was the balance of snaps on the left-hand side of the line was actually from Des Holmes. And then we saw Rasheed Walker move over to the right-hand side. And Will Fries didn't get as many snaps as we thought. A locked-in starter, or so we thought, a guy who's played in some capacity since his freshman year, and now redshirt freshman year, now he's a redshirt junior, perhaps sent to the bench for a redshirt freshman in Rasheed Walker. So how does this affect Penn State's line? Well, if you guys remember one of our Blitz segments last year, we were talking about the right tackle position and Will Fries versus Chaz Wright. Chaz Wright being a more athletic, big guy that could get down the field and throw blocks when you're running more of that RPO style that they like to run under Ricky Ronnie. But in pure pass protection, it was Will Fries that was the more attractive option at right tackle. Now, for a myriad of reasons, it ended up being Will Fries winning that job. The difference in run blocking versus pass blocking wasn't exactly the same. Will Fries was a much better pass blocker. Chaz Wright really struggled. But now, Des Holmes is a guy on the left-hand side that is very athletic and can get downfield as well as any big guy you're going to see. And Rasheed Walker has many of those same traits. Rasheed Walker, in one of the big runs throughout the game, playing left tackle, they left this defensive end with a direct run into the backfield, which you like to do in an RPO situation because then you're going to make this defensive end read the quarterback's eyes. The quarterback is going to read the defensive end's eyes and make a determination. Am I going to keep this football or am I going to hand it off to the running back? And that is generally the point of the RPO. It's putting one defender in a position to make a decision between two guys, quarterback, running back, and then allowing the rest of that offensive line to block at the second level. So Rasheed Walker made a brilliant play, allowing the defensive end from Idaho to make this decision. Clifford made the right call to hand off to the running back, and the running back followed Rasheed Walker as this defensive end made a decision to go after Clifford, who no longer had the football. So Rasheed Walker, in addition to being what I've seen in limited action as a very solid pass blocker, is very effective as well when it comes to the RPO. Now, why is he comfortable on the right? That's a question I don't have the answer to, but Des Holmes has a lot of the same characteristics that Rasheed Walker does, and he's been tremendous in terms of pass blocking. Now Rasheed Walker, if he's going to be comfortable on the right-hand side, I think you have a dynamic duo, and unfortunately for Will Fries, it could spell the end of extended playing time for him, and he could be relegated to a backup spot. So something to keep in mind as the season moves forward. Now let's talk about the interior defensive linemen. Steven Gonzalez, C.J. Thorpe, guys that were penciled in as starters. Mike Miranda, a guy we've heard about for a long time, big name recruit when he came in, now an opportunity to play on this offensive line. He was listed as an or for both the right and left guard position and as the backup center. And we saw him get snaps at each of those positions, but he actually outsnapped Steven Gonzalez and outsnapped C.J. Thorpe. So I think what we're going to see here is Miranda being your guy that has the most versatility on this offensive line, and it's whose spot is he going to take? Not that he's 100% locked into getting a starting role, but he has endeared himself to this coaching staff and I think makes himself a very viable playing option going forward because he can play either spot and he's impressed in those opportunities. Michael Mennett, I do think is fairly solid at that center position, but it doesn't hurt to have Mike Miranda able and willing to play at that center spot and take all three interior linemen positions. So, to use a technical term, a technology term, a disruptor. Des Holmes and Mike Miranda, your disruptors on the Penn State offensive line, and for very good reason. Very interested to see how that plays out over the rest of the year, and something I think you guys should watch as they take on Buffalo and the games thereafter. So that's the Blitz. We'll come back. We'll have a quick discussion on the Blitz and get Tyler's thoughts there, and then it's time to bring on our guest picker, Chris Pierangeli, who is live in studio, is preparing his picks, and is prepared to delight and amaze. So thanks for being with us, and we'll be right back.
I would say that LaSalle is dynamic. Prepared. Active. Diverse. Brotherhood. Family.
Dunphy Ford is Mayfair's neighborhood Ford store.
Nobody knows your neighborhood like Dunphy Ford.
Nearly 40 years.
Right here on Frankfurt Avenue.
Generation after generation, our neighbors continue to be our customers. We have access to the cars and trucks you want with financing you need.
Dunphy Ford is Northeast Philly's first choice for America's #1 brand. 7700 Frankfurt Avenue in Mayfair. Online at www.dunphyford.com.
Come experience the Dunphy difference. You'll be glad you did.
One of the most important relationships a business can have is with its commercial banker. This is Bob Long, and when I'm not broadcasting sports, I'm servicing my clients and building relationships with prospective clients. Whether now is the time to grow through capital investment, to drive operational efficiencies, or to leave a legacy through succession planning, I can be a resource to guide you through the process. Bob Long, a commercial banker in the greater Philadelphia area, where my goal is to help your business grow.
And welcome back, everybody, inside the Bluebell Studios here for Bob Long Sports. This is the Nittany Lion Sports Report. Bob Long, Tyler Gehlhaus, and look who we have. We have Chris Pierangeli, our guest picker for the evening of Central Bucks East, the soccer coach and the track and field coach over there, and a Penn State graduate, and a longtime host of Bob Long Sports. So it's so great to have you on, Chris.
Happy to be here.
Yes. Well, appreciate your time and making your way out here this evening. Tyler, want to get your thoughts before we move on to our picks about the Blitz segment that you just heard.
I think that first and foremost, another great job on the Blitz, Bob. Well prepared, well thought out, and very accurate. I think that Des Holmes is definitely pushing for one of the tackle positions, and it would probably be Fries. And then I think it is interesting that Walker then bumps over to the right. I'm not sure if it's Holmes is better at the left. I mean, I'm assuming that's what it would be, but I'm not totally sure. And then on the interior, I think that Miranda, he just got co-player of the week with KJ Hamler for Penn State's offense. I mean, he's pushing the right buttons. He's doing the right thing. And he can pretty much play any of those three interior positions. I think you're right that Minette has that middle center spot locked up. No need to play with that right now, but the two guard positions are interesting because you have Gonzalez, who came back for his fifth year, could have had a shot at the pros, like McGovern and Bates. He decided to come back, though, and then you have Thorpe, who they're very high on for his run blocking. They love his mentality, kind of like that old school lineman that just wants to throw people to the ground. They love his intensity. So it's going to be interesting, but again, another good problem to have because it's competition. It's going to bring out the best of everyone, and like you said, the five best will play at the end of the day.
Yeah, we mentioned about Jan Johnson. The same will be the case on the offensive line. So, Chris, whether it's that topic or anything in particular about Penn State, the football team, the program this year, general takeaways this year.
I was very impressed, and what I think stood out to me, I was impressed with the defensive line. And I know they're experienced, maybe more so than they have been in recent years. But just in general, the pressure they got on the quarterback, their ability to make tackles, to stuff the run, it's all relative to an extent. I'm sure you guys touched on it with it being Idaho. But still, when we look at Penn State's first couple weeks, especially post-sanctions and James Franklin, they've had struggles and scares. App State, who has scared other teams before and upset them. But either way, they've had scares. This was the most dominant win I've seen in recent memory anyway.
Yeah.
And just the feel of that goes a long way for confidence building. And, of course, we'll see again with Buffalo and Pitt, and these next couple games will teach us a little more of whether this is a sign of how good they can be or not. But as far as the first game, it took a couple drives with those field goals, and then after that, the offense took off, and the defensive line stood out to me. And as far as a dominant win, it was very impressive.
It's pretty good stuff there from our man Chris Pierangeli. But as much as it sounds like it, that is not Chris Pierangeli's job to break down football, though maybe it should be. What you do for a living is quite an interesting story, and one I wanted to highlight here on the show tonight. You're the head soccer coach of CB East and track and field. So you moved from soccer after cross-country season, then a lot of the runners moved to track and field, and you're coaching that as well. Your passion and vocation is that of teaching, and I've known that for a long time, and I think that's awesome. Wanted to get your story in your own words, kind of how you got to where you are. Tell us a little bit about your specific situation now, and the floor is kind of yours.
Well, I appreciate the compliment about the football analysis, but it wouldn't go nearly as deep as you guys can go, break it down position by position. But so funny first is the Penn State connection. I always thought I was going to be a teacher. There were a couple times, and working with Bob Long Sports was a blast, and different sports journalism passions there. But then I found that outlet to be more in coaching, which I'll get to in a second. But when I did my student teaching, they placed me in Bucks County, and that's about an hour away from Springfield, Delaware County, where I grew up. And it was all new to me, but I just heard a lot of good things. And the amazing part is you do student teaching, and then you're looking for the job. And a lot of times, if the student teaching goes well, you can work in the district. It was actually former Penn State kicker Travis Forney who had a hip replacement surgery scheduled for the month of January. And I actually delayed my graduation to finish the undergrad part up at Penn State and then add a half a semester back to live at home in Philly. So that timing set up the fact that when I went to look for the job post student teaching, it was Travis Forney's spot that was open. And then that was a month, and I knew take full advantage of it, stayed late hours, worked hard. And then it was a little bit of lucky timing again that another teacher left the district, which was, so I started with 8th grade social studies, and then I became 9th grade, and both were U.S. history courses. Finished out the year there. Then my first full year, they allowed me to come back and fight for a contract. That's how it works in the CB district, and was in 3 buildings, which was kind of wild. I would start at the high school at CB East, where I am now full-time, but then I'd hop over, literally walk over to Hollicong Middle School, do a couple classes there, and then I'd drive to UNAMI, which actually feeds more in the south, so a little further, literally south of East. So it was a busy first 2 years, but each time along the way, I kept coaching, and I kept loving that. I got to do 7th grade girls basketball, 8th grade baseball, but I played soccer in high school and ran track, and I knew that those are the spots I felt most at home and knew the most about, and also wanted to keep growing and learning. And now, so like you said, it's exciting. I'm the actually JV for boys and then head coach for track for winter and spring. And it's exactly what I wanted to do, which is pretty great. So it's my outlet of sports is through the coaching. We got a big one tomorrow. I geared up with the shirt and hat here, but we take on West. And last year, CB West was the best team in our conference in the Suburban One Continental for soccer. Then it was North Penn. West actually ended up going further than them. North Penn's probably the returning powerhouse, and then West. But I got to tell you, the things that are working for our varsity program, they're going to give West a run for their money tomorrow, and I can't wait to see what happens. It's going to be fun.
That's good stuff. Yeah. That is good stuff. Yeah, I remember when you were doing the 8th grade thing and you were coaching some girls basketball, kind of got your feet wet, and I saw the passion even that day when myself and another friend of ours, Dan Green, snuck into the building, and you didn't even see us till after the game was over. But
and we learned it's
the Chris I know. Let's go, girls. Let's go.
Did they win, Bob?
No, we fell short, I believe.
Okay.
There was a lot of
I guess
pressing going on.
Okay.
Yeah,
I could have sworn they won.
A lot of full court press causes some ugly basketball in 7th grade.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
That's great. So
that is awesome.
And then track going well also. Strong team and kind of, I know from talking to you off air, a way to kind of make an impact from both a physical, mental, and then even the school side in terms of helping these kids reach their goals. And I think that's a really unique thing about track. It well extends beyond the track, the cylinder.
Yeah, I saw 2 athletes today, actually, a runner that came back who's in community college now, but thinking about the Navy still, and that's his path. And then another one that was probably the most talented runner I had, and he'd be the first to admit he dealt with race anxiety and some other things, and he's at Cincinnati now. He's redshirting through cross country, but I literally got a text this afternoon, and that's what makes it all the worthwhile, those connections you build, and that's true of anything. I think any job, but that you really care about, and you guys can appreciate that, guys who share the same passion for sports, for breaking down things, and for impactful relationships. But I heard from a couple today, it was pretty cool, and Bob and I have talked about this. I think it's funny. A few years ago, if you'd asked me which sport would you care more about, it probably would have been soccer, and I still care a lot about that. I care about both. Really, anything I dive into as far as coaching, but the more I've worked with track and learned, and I've been fortunate, I was around 2 excellent coaches at East, still one of them that's my assistant. Without him, we wouldn't have success. And then Even talking to Bob and some of the other guys at Penn State who ran club cross country, all the way to guys who ran within high school. Like, I've learned a great deal, and it's become my passion. And it's really, it goes all the way back to the beginning of my story. It's a combination of hard work, but there's been a lot of fortunate timing, and then just try to take advantage of those opportunities has been pretty cool.
Good stuff. It's a great story. We're happy to have you. And that's part of the reason, big part of the reason, we do this guest picker thing. We're going to have some fun making picks, but we like to tell local human interest stories, a rising young star in the teaching and coaching area. And so that's Chris Pierangeli, our guest here tonight. And Tyler has our games for this week. The number to beat is 5-1.
Wow, that's tough.
Tyler Kern last week came out.
It's impressive.
Yeah, he had a very good week. So, yeah, Tyler Kern, last week's special guest, 5-1. Bob went 4-2. I went 3-3. We'll keep Bob and I will keep a running tally, and we'll also jot down the picks and the records for our guest pickers. So this week we have Chris picking. We have 5 games as always. Actually, I'm sorry, 6 games as always. The one game is Penn State, and it's based off the spread. It's the only spread game, and that will be Penn State, and we'll save that one for last. So we're going to start off a couple good games this week. The big one of the week that we are actually going to start off with is number 6 LSU at number 9 Texas. And again, this is no spread head-to-head.
Yeah, I think LSU is going to win. Honestly, not knowing that much about either team, I just think big game opportunity here. They're going to go out and execute. I'm just going to go with the higher seed.
It's a big game for Big O, head coach Ed Orgeron, and I like the LSU Tigers as well, in part because I know for your playoff prediction to come true, I think you're going to pick Texas. Going to be a very difficult game. Home game for LSU. Don't know a ton about them yet. A lot of changes from last year. Texas still not quite sold. I think the defensive front of LSU and the defense makes the difference, and they win a close one in Austin.
Yeah, I kind of locked myself into this Texas pick with my prediction. I think LSU is a very good team. They were very impressive, much like Penn State was on Saturday in terms of, okay, look, like Joe Burrows was slinging the ball around down there for LSU, and they were clicking on all cylinders. They have a new passing game coordinator, Joe Brady, who was actually with Penn State at one point and went to the Saints, and now he's with LSU. I'm not sure if he's offensive coordinator as well, but he's definitely involved with the passing game. And their passing game, as you know, LSU is usually known for pounding the rock, throw it here and there, but winning with great running backs, great running game, and an excellent defense. Games at Texas, I think Texas is going to be juiced up. It's a night game. College game day is going to be there. I think it's going to be a very close game. I have to go with the Longhorns to pull it out. They were one of my playoff picks, so I'm going to have to go with them to pull it out. We are going to jump to our second game. A very good game last year. In fact, it was Clemson's closest game of the year, beating Texas A&M at Kyle Field by 2 points. At the time, Kelly Bryant was a starting quarterback, getting most of the reps for the Clemson Tigers. This year, Kellen Mond, Jimbo Fisher go on the road. Number 12, Texas A&M at number 1, Clemson.
I'm going to go with Dabo's boys. I've been impressed with what Dabo Sweeney has done with that program, and I just think Clemson's going to win. The Texas A&M program wasn't there when the guy's talking a little smack. He called the upset already,
did.
right?
What a lineman.
That is bold.
That is bold.
I mean, hey, time to execute, put up or shut up and play. But I think Clemson's they've been an impressive team. I'm not saying anything that's groundbreaking here, but I just think they're going to execute. They're going to win. And I actually think a guy talking like that's going to come back to bite him.
Bulletin board material. It's not needed for Clemson.
Exactly.
I'll answer your question with a question.
Okay.
Is this game BYOG?
Bring your own guts.
Bring your own guts?
I don't know. That might be that kind of weather.
Yep.
Because that was the Notre Dame game when it was pouring rain. I mean, if the hurricane, I don't know what the track's looking like, but it could be.
I like Clemson. I mean, for them to lose this football game, I'll willingly put that as an L on my season-long record. But if we're taking this straight up, I don't think there's any way you pick against Clemson in this game.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that if you're looking at the spread, we're probably looking at something different potentially. A&M is improved, but Clemson is still, in my opinion, the top team in the country right now. I mean, they killed Georgia Tech, and Trevor Lawrence didn't even really play that well last Thursday. I mean, I think it's too much to handle for A&M. It's in Death Valley, Clemson. We're going to jump to our third game. We are going to go Syracuse. They're coming in at 22 right now at Maryland, who just won by 79 points over Howard, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's right.
An interesting game here. Syracuse at Maryland.
I'm going Syracuse. I've just been impressed with the way that team has improved and played the last couple years, and I think surprised some teams. Biased or not, I'm not overly impressed with Maryland, even though they have a huge win in their first week against Howard. But I think Syracuse executes.
I think the campus is focused on one thing and one thing only, and that's September the 27th, a Friday night when Penn State comes into town. That's their Super Bowl. I don't see it this weekend. I think it has a chance to be a very good game. But I do like the program up there at Syracuse. I do think that they're going to compete quite well in the ACC this year. And I think the Orange win a big non-conference game, one that we'll be looking at between two middle pack. I think Syracuse will be higher in the pack in the ACC, Maryland lower. But you always like those September games in between inter-conference games. And I think Syracuse wins this one.
Not to jump to next week, but Syracuse hosts Clemson next week.
Yeah, so you think they're looking ahead too?
I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a little interesting what happens here. Maryland's actually favorites. They are a 2-point favorite right now. I think Dino Babers is running an incredible program up there at Syracuse. He's really turned things around. They have a really good defense. I think that they're going to win on the road. I think it's going to be very close. I don't think Maryland's as good as, like you said, as a 79-0 win over Howard. But I think that Syracuse, they have to be careful not to look ahead to that Clemson game. So I think it's going to be a very close game. I think Syracuse pulls it out in the end. Very close. Probably one of the better games. I think it's going to be one of the better matchups of this week in terms of close, exciting games of two Power 5 conferences.
Agreed. I think it's a great game. Great game you picked for us to pick.
What time is that game, by the way?
It's right up top.
Noon. It is at noon.
Yeah.
Why is Penn State at 7:30 against Buffalo?
A lot of it has to do with the TV,
network.
the television, just like the same reason that Penn State, Michigan could be at like a noon kick.
Because of Fox.
It's bizarre, but it could. It's all based off of television. What do
you guys think about that? Real quick, Fox making the decision to make their top game programming, putting their top crew and their top choice of game for the week at 12 o'clock noon with Joel Klatt and Gus Johnson, trying to kind of stake out that noon spot.
It's interesting. I mean, I understand it in a sense that you probably don't want to compete with it's ABC at night, right? The big game or ESPN, right?
And SEC on CBS is 3:30, and kind of had that locked up for years.
So, I mean, they kind of were forced into that corner. I don't think it's going to bring that many more people up to watch it. I don't think it's going to make that much of an impact.
Then they talk about their pregame crew.
Right. I mean, everyone on the West Coast, a lot of people are still sleeping.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, on the
East Coast.
Yeah. Depending on what you did on Friday night. But no, seriously, I mean, the Pac-12 actually, I don't know if you guys heard about this. It was talked about that they were going to start 9 a.m. local time kickoffs. If you haven't looked into it, look into it. It doesn't sound like it's going to happen, but it was a real possibility that they were going to have, just say UCLA, Oregon, 9 a.m. at Oregon. I mean, it's just silly.
Yeah, that is tough.
I mean, come on.
I don't see any
so
purpose
the team's
for that.
We got to open a stadium at 6 a.m. Like,
yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
What I think they're trying to do, again, besides that time slot, is they're trying to push their pregame show as well, and that's the Matt Leinart.
They want to compete that
Brady
against College
Quinn,
Game Day.
There you go.
And then roll right into their big game.
It's hard to compete against College Game Day. I mean, it's just such a staple of the college football season. But you're right. If they can have that as their big game, I mean, I just don't – you're not doing the fans – and honestly, you're not doing the players who are the most important in all this any justice. I mean, these guys, for example, if they put Penn State, Michigan at noon, I mean, it's still a whiteout. It's still a huge game, more than likely. But there's just something special about a whiteout at night at Beaver Stadium. Not even for those players, but all of college football. I mean, that is a game people, an atmosphere people look forward to.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, so it's you're kind of doing everybody a disservice just for your own pocket. But at the end of the day, money talks, right?
Money talks.
That's true.
Hopefully, we don't have to worry about it, but it is a true
Speaking
real
of money
possibility.
talking, we have a Penn State line to pick coming
do.
up soon, huh?
But Miami, our fourth pick, Miami at UNC.
I like. Oh, sorry.
Both teams had totally
Hey, I'm
different
first
outcomes.
here.
But
I'm going UNC. I don't have a good explanation.
I got Miami. I think now I do think back to a game when Miami was the year they were the number 2 team in the country and they lost on the road at Pitt in the last week.
Not that long ago.
Yes, that's right. And they had a game at UNC was quite possibly the worst football game I've ever seen in my entire life. And it was just awful. Malik Rozier threw like 4 interceptions. They fumbled a bunch of balls. And UNC somehow stayed in that football game with a terrible roster. Yes, they're improved. I like Miami. I don't know that I like Manny Diaz because of what he did to Temple. But, I like Miami to win that game.
this is an 8 o'clock game, by the way, on ACC Network. I like Miami, too. I like Miami because, first of all, they had a week off. I think that'll do a lot for them after opening in week 0 against Florida in Orlando. They have a week to get ready, refresh after a disappointing loss, one that they could have easily the game was up for grabs, easily could have won. UNC coming off of a really good comeback against South Carolina to start the Mac Brown era on the right foot. But college football is all about emotions, and a lot of it's timing and when you get a team. And Miami has a bye coming into this. UNC's on a high right now. I like Miami. I think it's going to be another one of those. I think it should be a pretty good game, like competitive-wise. It should be a pretty close game. And then our 5th pick, last pick before Penn State, Stanford, number 23, 10:30, little late-night paction at USC without starting quarterback JT Daniels out for the season, torn ACL.
Yeah, and I think that injury swung this for me because I thought it's a close matchup going into it. I honestly didn't see much of the Stanford game the other day. This past weekend, as I was very focused on the Penn State game, even when it was at one point very much in hand. But I think Stanford ends up winning. I think that injury is too much for USC to overcome, especially right after it happened.
I don't know that I'm convinced JT Daniels is the guy going forward after the year he had last year, whether or not he's injured. And on a more funny note, Tyler, Stanford Northwestern is the reason I have a lead on you right now, so no reason not to ride the hot hand.
I look like a total
Stanford.
idiot after saying, Hunter Johnson he was a really good quarterback, and then he went like 3 for 8 or something and got yanked.
Remember, he was a guy Penn State was looking
Yeah,
at
I mean,
back in
he
the
was
day
at
as well.
Clemson until Trevor Lawrence beat him out.
Well, right, yeah.
Right, and he was a highly touted, but I guess maybe Northwestern has these slow starts, though, like every year. They really do.
Yep.
And then they turn it on.
They turn it
on.
on.
They do. They're just a slow start team. So
Good news, it doesn't affect their ability to win the West.
Right. Anything's possible in the West. So are you going? Did you make your
Stanford.
pick? Stanford. Okay. You know what? I like that. I like that Stanford pick. I think that the injury to JT Daniels, and I'm not really sure how good USC is anyway. We don't know how good a lot of teams are, but Clay Helton is constantly on the hot seat, and losing the quarterback's going to could add even more pressure for him to win. Winning's not going to be as easy right now. Stanford, well-coached team behind David Shaw. I think they go in there. I think it's going to be a close game, like a lot of these games this week. But I think at the end of the day, I think Stanford pulls out. They're going to have the better team, and it's going to be a close one. But Cardinal.
There you go. And then a Penn State game.
Last but not least, it looks like the line's climbing a little bit, but we're going to keep it at 28.5. So 4 touchdowns. Penn State is favored by 28.5. Are you taking Penn State with the points, or you think Buffalo covers?
I actually think Buffalo covers. I expect a little bit of, and this is going to contradict what I said a little bit earlier, so I hope I'm wrong with this pick. But even though Penn State's Week 1 performance was the most dominant I've seen, or at least is in recent memory, just how it felt, how they executed after those first couple drives. I'm trying to, I think, check the fact that it was against Idaho, with all due respect for the program, that, they just are outmatched in that situation. I think Buffalo, Penn State handles the game, but I think we see a few more mistakes maybe on offense or a few more sputters there. Maybe Buffalo gets a chance to move the ball a little bit here and there, and Penn State wins by 21 or 24, but they just miss covering.
I like Penn State to cover. I think Tyler's talking about that line starting to move. I'm glad you didn't change that on us, and I think that line's going to continue to climb with a lot of money coming in on Penn State. I think this is another one where the defensive line is just going to obliterate a much inferior offensive line. I feel like I'm saying the same spiel I did last week. I think the offensive line and the 4 running backs can run it down Buffalo's throat, and I think under James Franklin, I said this exact same thing last week. Under Joe Paterno, we'd never be talking about covering a 40-point spread like it was last week. And I think James Franklin's teams just tend to, when there's that much of an athleticism differential, and in this era of college football, can and will run up the score. I just struggle to see Buffalo scoring very much against Penn State.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. 28, 4 touchdowns is a lot. But Penn State was, 38, did we say, for Idaho, and they won
Something
by
like that.
70.
It's different.
So I know it's
but
a lot different, but I think they're going to cover. I don't think they'll cover by much. I think 28.5 is going to cover based off of what we have, but I think it'll probably be about that 32-point victory for Penn State. I saw that Buffalo threw the ball maybe 12 times in their last game, and I'm not sure if that's because they just like to run the ball and they didn't need to throw it, or they literally can't throw it well. But, it's another game that Penn State's going to totally outmatch Buffalo, and I think this team has something to prove. And I'm not saying you're gonna prove a lot by beating these kind of teams, but a lot has to be said for completely manhandling from start to finish, and kind of just getting that mentality of it doesn't matter who we play, we're gonna beat you, and we're gonna beat you as bad as we want to beat you.
I like it.
I got a quick question on that note, and this is where the high school coach comes out in me. I get a little, I don't know if disappointing's the word, but when I see 79-7, at a certain point, it's a bit, I'll just use disappointing. It's tough because in the sportsmanship side of it, it's do you need those last 3 scores? Once you're over 60, do we need it? But what I just asked you guys real quick, do you think a big part of that is at the end of the day, we're looking for the top 4 teams? Does this play a factor, or is it more just welcome to college football, execute?
I think that if Penn State were to win that game 62-7, would probably have been just as nice as winning at 79-7. With that being said, they had a walk-on quarterback in for the fourth quarter. They had a walk-on running back in for the fourth quarter. They had, a couple newly scholarship guys that used to be walk-ons at receiver, young guys on the line. It wasn't
pedal to the metal.
You know what I
did
mean?
Do the right thing.
And I think James Franklin summed it up pretty well today at his press conference, saying, well, you know what, we have these guys, these walk-ons, and these guys that don't get a chance all the time. When they come in, we want them to succeed. And, they're not throwing bombs, and these guys are out there. They're probably not going to play much for the season or their career, and they're doing their job. And unfortunately for Idaho and for some people, they're scoring. But I actually don't have a problem with it. I don't really think it's for the playoff perception, because I don't think there's that much difference between winning 62-7 and 79-7 in week 1 against Idaho at the end of the day. But I think, you're in a sense giving back to these guys that busted every day practice at Arnold Scholarship and saying, go have some fun, see if you can score, and and we'll celebrate.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I got nothing else to add. Maybe the way to condense that is just ask the question, what do you do? You know what I mean? But absent kneeling the football.
Is it worse, Skal? Is it worse
to kneel it,
sportsmanship to just say we're just gonna run the same play, which I didn't even see the fourth quarter, so I don't even know. I'm assuming they ran it almost every play.
A lot, yeah.
But kind of just fall down when the other team's running so they can score type of thing. You know what I mean? That's even worse.
Yeah, that's fair.
So you know what I mean? Not that would ever happen, but Idaho's Division I football players too. Now they are FCS, but and they should, they're going to learn a lot from that and hopefully get better from it. And they also get a nice paycheck. The players don't, but the school
there goes
gets
the
a
money
nice
at the
paycheck.
top again.
But they're funding the rest of the athletic department. Now, funny story there is that when that game was scheduled, Idaho was an FBS football team, And the athletic department made the decision in 2015 to scale it back to the FCS to save money, issue less scholarships, etc. Penn State, and Corey Geiger wrote this story, so all credit to him. Penn State did not have an out clause in their contract. They were actually scheduled to go, and I want to say it was LSU or Clemson, one of the Tigers down there. Idaho also was scheduled to go play them in one of these upcoming years. That school did have an out clause and got out of the game. Now, I think Penn State, Corey describes, could have gone to other measures to try to move the game due to the change in circumstances, but James Franklin and the team honored the contract. So that is kind of how the game came about. That said, it's not like Penn State isn't scheduling FCS opponents, because in 2021 is when Villanova's on the schedule.
And Delaware comes on a schedule.
Yeah.
But let's not forget, Penn State is going to be doing a home-and-home with West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Auburn.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's not like I do think it's important to play this kind of game to open up the season. As funny as that sounds.
No, what it's important to do is schedule the bye game on the year where you have 4 regular season Big Ten home games, so that and then schedule your home and home with a West Virginia or something like that.
Right.
At home on the year, you only have the 4 Big Ten home games, so that you ensure you're going to have 7 revenue-making home game opportunities. I mean, in addition to easing into the season, that's really the reason to.
100%. Yep.
So anyway. Good question there, Chris. Good discussion.
Yeah,
really.
You were on here for a while. That was great.
That's
that was
right.
Now we'll see how his picks are. We'll see how smart he really is. Right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's the real question.
Tyler Kern is just laughing from his ivory tower, upon which his 5-1 lead currently sits. But
he's like that Mac Brown UNC pick. Terrible.
Chris, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story and spending some time with us here.
Appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Tyler, thank you as always for the time. Thanks to all the viewers and listeners. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and SoundCloud for those of you audio preference folks. But we will be back next week to recap Buffalo, preview Pitt, and it'll be a great week of Penn State football. Enjoy it for all the folks that are going up to Beaver Stadium this week. Have fun, be safe, and we'll see you guys next time. Good night.